what I'm going to do is I prepared a paper, so I'll read it. But instead of doing a PowerPoint, what I thought might be more appropriate is to to show one of Amy Greenfield's films as I'm speaking. Her film titled Wildfire, which I discuss in my presentation. If I know this is kind of unconventional, perhaps, but it pulls together a lot of the themes, and there is no, you have to see it move. Okay, so I'm just going to make sure that I can get this going. Okay, well, that's Amy Greenfield, and my paper will focus primarily on her work. Amy is, just one second, many windows. Okay, so I want to, maybe what I'll do is I have a few slides to kind of give you an idea of what Wildfire and Dervish looks like. But maybe what I'll do is just show you a few of the images that appear in Wildfire. It's a digital piece, and actually at the beginning of it, it starts with Annabelle's butterfly dance, and the piece then kind of revolves into these multiple dancers working on swirling with sheets. Maybe what I'll do is just start my paper, since I guess technology is not on my side today. Okay, so the title is A Duet Between the Organism and Technology, Amy Greenfield's Screen Dance. Marshall McLuhan called attention to the cultural and social effects of dynamics between arts and technology, especially at points of major technological transformations. He saw artists as those who lead people through their art into awareness of the environments in which they live and which they create for themselves through technology. He argued that, McLuhan came to this idea by studying the works of poets and artists. He argued that major technological transitions, so for example, the introduction of new technologies and the waning of older technologies, summon artists to not only revisit the history and the roots of their art forms, but also to advance new ways of experiencing their art by means of hybrid forms. The screen dance works of Amy Greenfield, which are hybrids of dance and experimentations with various cutting-edge motion picture technologies, not only articulate the turning points of developments in electrotechnics and in shifting conceptions of the self, but also retrieve and weave into their fabric the forgotten or omitted by history women. And some of them are both real and mythical women. Over the past 50 years, Amy Greenfield's contributions to the tradition of screen dance have been very substantial in quantity. Since 1967, she made 44 works, and significant in advancing its conceptual framework through her writing, and especially its aesthetic scope through experimentation with moving image media. So in addition to working with film and electronic video and digital video, Amy also did holography in 1980s. And those are, they're of dancers, and they're from the descriptions, because I was never able to see one, they're being archived at Anthology Film Archives. They are almost like mini films, mini movies. So anyways, she's considered a pioneer of video dance, having developed a new form of video dance, choreographing for the video camera and television screen. Greenfield also probes the mythical past of strong women, such as Antigone, Salome, and Ishtar. And while simultaneously working with cutting edge electronic and digital technology and in unconventional ways to accomplish the directions set out by her projects. In this presentation, I will concentrate on two video dance works by Amy Greenfield, Dervish from 1974 and Wildfire from 2002. I will argue that these works not only technologically propel future forward the practice of screen dance, but also harken back to its history, the live and film serpentine performances of Loie Fuller and her imitators, which both of Greenfield's films evoke. Indeed, in her 1983 statement, she noted, "It is evident to me now that in my discoveries, I was drawing on basic work done in both dance and film, even as far back as Isadora Duncan and the turn of the century dance films. More significantly, what underpins Greenfield's discoveries and guides her creative process is risk." Describing her creative process, she says, "Filmmaking for me is taking the risk to go into the unknown and the ability to come out of it alive with the film. So to a greater or lesser extent, I never made the work I started out to make that I thought I was going to make, because the power of going into the unexpected takes over. The adventure, which is more alive and true, I find, than totally sticking to the preconceptualized plan. When I performed, I was beyond thought, or as Yeats wrote, all thought becomes an image and the soul becomes a body. Now, when I'm behind the camera, it's as if I have no thought or a body. It seems like I don't exist, as I'm giving myself entirely to what's coming through the camera lens." Greenfield's descriptions of her filmmaking process as a plunge into the unknown and not permitting preconceptualized plan to determine the process recalls Arthur Rimbaud's statements from the turn of the 20th century, well, roughly 1870s, on what it takes to become a poet. And Rimbaud advised, "It's wrong to say I think, better to say I am thought." Something other than the self, some otherness deep within, or the deeper self, does the thinking for the artist and directs the creative process. When asked about the significance of self-abnegation and permission one gives oneself to just let go in a creative process, Greenfield replied, "You're able to go of all the preparation and then you just let go. sorry, you're able to go because of all that preparation, and then you just let go. It's exactly like Zen. They learn and learn and learn, and the master always says, now forget everything you've learned. And this is the beginning. I guess it's kind of like that. It is selfless, and it is also the same thing. It's like you are in the present and nothing else exists. It's the deeper self. It's not the ego self. It's the deeper self, which doesn't have all those layers. And that's what I miss about the dancing part of it. But I do experience some of it behind the camera. Just as a side note, Amy stopped dancing after she, in 1990s, after she completed her film Antigone, in which this was the last time she performed. And her subsequent works, she works with dancers, and but continues to very much shape these works in an interesting way. Sorry. But risk and self-abnegation also enters on another level in Greenfield's work, namely through the involvement of others in the process. Dancers and performers, mostly in her recent work, in which she no longer dances, filmmakers, camera persons, for example, Hilary Harris, Richard Leacock, who shot Amy Greenfield dance, and technicians in post-production stages. All right, so Dervish and Wildfire involve different degrees of risk and self-abnegation in Greenfield's creative process, and especially in her particular ways of working with motion picture technology, which often involve a plunge into the unknown, while traversing new aesthetic and technological territories. When Greenfield composes her video dance projects, she shapes and gives form to the bioenergies of dancers' dynamic movements, which are present in the electromagnetic energies, the electronic signals of video. In both Dervish and Wildfire, she writes, so much of the energy is communicated through the use of technology. What I did for both pieces was to utilize existing technology in non-standard ways for my purposes, end of quote. More significantly, these two works bear tremendous resemblance to Loie Fuller's performances. For example, the undulating, spiraling, and wave-like forms created with sheets of fabric through movements of the body. The use of fabric as both a screen and an extension of the dancer's body, expanding the scope of her movement rather than its mere use as decoration or costume. The attention accorded to the possibilities of the medium and its audiovisual effects as integral to the choreographic composition, and the focus on shaping of energies conveyed through the body and the medium. And most significantly, the deeply evocative quality inherent in the environments created through the hybrid of dance and technology. So in Loie Fuller's case, that would be color electric light, and her dance. Dervish was Greenfield's foray into the video medium. It was performed and recorded twice. It was performed twice, in 1972 and then again in 1974. The second recording is what constitutes Dervish today. In Dervish, Greenfield tested the limits of her own energy by means of durational performance, which consisted of her spinning continuously in clockwise and counterclockwise directions for 20 minutes. This set structure included an additional parameter, the lifetime switching between the two video, or actually television cameras, in response to Greenfield's energy. Greenfield describes this process as well as her own non-standard ways of working with video in the early days of this technology as follows. Dervish utilized two cameras at opposite sides of the studio with live time editing switching between them, responding to my own very real energy. I set the task for myself to go to my limits of my own energy, then finally dropping. That energy couldn't be communicated without the dynamic camera close-ups in relation to the irregular rhythms of the editing, with the cuts electronically slashing the continuity of spinning. End of quote. Therefore, both the bodily and the medium specific limits, which set the temporal and energetic parameters of this piece, are demarcated in Dervish. Dervish consists of actually very few and minimum visual elements, which, when set in motion, erupt into a rich polyphonic visual composition. It was recorded in black and white video in a studio and consists of one continuous take captured by two cameras. It begins with a shot of a crumpled white sheet of fabric laying on the ground. Nude Greenfield emerges from the darkness, walks over to the sheet, and crouches down to pick it up. As she stands up with the sheet in her hands, the second camera, from the slightly different angle on her, switches on. Through the slight angling and panning of both cameras towards the center, two bodies, images of Greenfield of roughly the same size, come together, which in their superimposed state resemble what Robert Collar, who is also her partner and film archivist, called a pair of butterfly wings. As the two bodies start to whirl, one camera zooms in on the torso, making one body double in size. When the two bodies are superimposed, the larger whirling body becomes the ground of the smaller whirling body. It's the figure, thus enveloping it. And through this whirling motion, the greater body of energy wraps around the smaller body of energy. When one body disappears or fades out, the energy of the movement does not cease. Instead, it is transferred to the other body until it disappears and the other, until it reappears and the other disappears, and so forth. Sometimes both bodies remain fused with one another, enticing viewers to scan the entire surface of the visual composition and to move between the two flows of energy emanating from both bodies, only to be violently severed from this movement when one of the bodies disappears or is introduced in its negative image. When two bodies appear as negative images, a new figure-ground relation is introduced. When the body with a sheet of fabric recedes into darkness and becomes the ground of the composition, the former ground, the dark studio background, is now white light and becomes the figure of the composition. This, of course, brings attention to the self-reflexive quality of this work, namely that the human body and video are media of energy, body as kinetic energy and video as electromagnetic energy. Okay. The sound in Dervish is diegetic and is solely created by Greenfield's kinetic body. The sound of her feet on the floor, the swishing sound of the sheet while whirling, and the progressively louder sounds of her late bird breathing. At about 7 minutes into the video, all the sounds fade into silence. The absence of sound drastically alters the viewing experience of movement, making it appear slower, less dynamic, and less complete. The transformation in the viewing experience of movement, in particular, movement appearing slower, can be interpreted as an aesthetic metaphor for Einstein's theory of special relativity. Moreover, the superimpositions of the same body captured from two distinct perspectives, or two points in physical space, but in the same time, also demonstrate how physical difference can be collapsed by means of electromagnetic technology. More importantly, in these superimpositions, not only do we see the spatial collapse, but also the overlapping of perspectives, the two camera perspectives, plus the perspective of viewers, contribute to the composition by viewers actively engaging in it and giving their sense and meaning to the perceived experience and form. In Wildfire, the 2002 video, Greenfield is no longer in front of the camera. Instead, she assumes the role of a film composer. In this video dance project, she relies on existing documentation of two dance performances. The 1894 film Annabelle, so this particular film, the Annabelle Serpentine Dance, and the 1996 video documentation of a performance concluding Raw-Edged Woman, a multimedia show at the Anthology Film Archives in New York. Robert Holler describes Wildfire as an ethereal transformation of Fuller, of Annabelle, and of the original performance of Raw-Edged Woman. Greenfield's video is indeed ethereal, for its content consists of ghosts of the past, and its form complements its otherworldly quality of the content by virtue of being shaped by the electronic medium, powered by invisible energy. Wildfire was composed through a hybrid of analog and digital post-production technologies, pushing the limits of each at the time when new digital video editing technology was beginning to become the standard among video makers and in the industry at the turn of the 21st century. Greenfield describes the process of composing this film as follows. Wildfire is truly made by technological post-production means, which progressively transform the 2 minutes of footage into a greater and greater energy in the 12-minute film. I used technology that was available in the early to mid 2000s and which combined analog with digital. Wildfire was made by combining a range of analog techniques, the analog manipulation of color, electronically adding the array of color, direction, backwards, forwards, strobing, speeding up, slowing down, and more were done all by me turning analog knobs by hand. My own perception of energy could respond directly to the image with the irregular intuitive rhythms not possible now on computers. we recorded and re-recorded these manipulations directly onto digital decks, so we could do multiple drafts without losing any quality. Um, I say we because I could only have done this at one of the most sophisticated editing houses, Broadway Video. And she had artist rates. And she says that they let me turn the knobs in my own totally non-standard ways. Those knobs are usually set in a standard position by the editor. This way, I had a total intuitive freedom. Wildfire is about free, intuitive female energy, and I was very aware of wanting that communication. Greenfield performed a remarkable feat in transforming the 2 minutes of straight documentation of a live performance into a ceaseless flow of ever-changing rhythms and visual variations that last 12 minutes. In being able to manipulate the image by hand using analog knobs, she was able to perform and even improvise with editing tools, as if she were playing a musical instrument. In moving the knobs with her hand, her body learned that certain movements would produce corresponding image effects, eventually relying less on thinking about what might work for a particular image and more on intuitively responding to the movements and rhythms of the video with her body. Greenfield's concluding statement that she wanted to communicate the free, intuitive female energy through Wildfire is somewhat puzzling. And especially what does it have to do with technology? But her inclusion of Edison's film Annabelle's Serpentine Dance at the beginning and end of the Wildfire to bracket the middle section of video is significant. And Robert Holler writes, this Edison film from the beginnings of cinema is particularly appropriate beyond its timeless frame, because Greenfield in 1970 began imagining of human movement in a vision based in motion picture technology. She recapitulates the modes of cinematic expression, the frame to excise the world, the edit to fracture and reconstruct the space, the uninterrupted shot to underlie our awareness of time, the moving camera to transport the consciousness of the audience, the transformation of the moving image with computers. Greenfield's imagining of human movement in a vision based on motion picture technology also includes electric and energetic aspects of cinema. Cinema, already at the turn of the 20th century, has been considered a medium of electricity along other electric media, for example, telegraph, radio transmission, magnetic sound recordings, which all contributed to the transition into the new electric era. In addition, the magic of cinema, its inherent capacity to bring to life or animate still images, had its color correlate in electricity, which too was perceived as magical. For with a flip of a switch, the entire city was set aglow. And thus both cinema and electricity were embraced with excitement at the turn of the 20th century, just as digital media and virtual reality are today. But there is more to it. This invisible energy, which makes the inanimate animate, had also captured attention of artists who thought about it in broader terms of cosmic energy and of human bodies as also manifesting this energy, but on a smaller micro scale. This cosmic energy is nature, and as are the electromagnetic waves which constitute electricity. Hence, when Greenfield states wildfire is about free intuitive female energy, she's also perhaps unconsciously connecting energy inherent in nature, its flows, its vibrations, its movements, which she qualifies as female energy, with the new form of energy in digital cinema, which too appears to possess the same qualities that can therefore be identified as feminine. At the turn of the 20th century, during the Paris Expo, female representations of electricity abounded and adorned the pavilion of electricity. Loie Fuller was accorded particular attention during this expo, which after all celebrated the wonders of this new technology, and Fuller embodied in her aesthetic. Not surprisingly, Greenfield's Wildfire was inspired by that period, which, while marking a major transition into a new era, also released previously repressed areas of Western civilization into the open, permitting these to resurface in art. And I quote her, "My inspiration partly came from the turn of the century Loie Fuller-esque film. I think it is called Butterflies. In it, a magician calls forth from a box an array of women dancing in Loie Fuller-esque butterfly dresses. He then tries to get them back into the box, but they refuse to do so and instead turn upon him and instigate their freedom and independence." It's funny, but but has this serious subtext of about female energy. It thus appears that the release of female energy was a significant aspect of the transition into the new electric environment and age, which found its ideal expression, albeit unconsciously, in the medium of cinema, both its form and content, but had already had its origins in Fuller's performances. I can just stop right now. What I can do maybe is share my paper or something like that, so people can see it. It's kind of difficult describing it because one has to kind of see the films, and they're not online. I don't know, a number of years back, YouTube took down all of her films. It drew quite a bit of attention because of her nude body. And of course, it was censored. So, but yeah, I'll just conclude here at this point.
Izabella, thank you very much. I'm a big fan of your work and I'm a big fan of Amy Greenfield, so this was really interesting and I would certainly love to read more and certainly see the film. But this is not there is a question in this, and so when you were describing how Amy worked with the editing process, I was really struck by the sense that you described, and I was thinking of it very much, it seemed like a performative act of editing, and we've been talking a little bit about this idea of this sort of negotiation between the subject and the filmmaker, and I'd never really sort of heard of an example of that happening in the editing process, and obviously working with improvisation has become, fairly widespread in screen dance, and it's often at the editing stage that we sort of fall down, and also this word risk that you use, because that is one of these things where we're is thrown into question in the editing process. So I guess that is my question for you about what Amy writes and talks about. Do you know, after she'd done that stage where she improvised the editing, as it were, and made her mark in a performative way, did she then go back and, in quotes, tidy up things or not? Do you know?
I believe that, I mean, those were the I guess, the effects that she was creating. And actually, this is a good question. I'm not sure. I knew it at one point. I think that, I mean, what she says is that they saved it on drives, so that they could continue working with it without losing resolution. So this means that she likely continued to probably clean it up and edit it. So it went through 2 stages.
Thank you.
Sorry.
I know we're out of time, so I won't say anymore.
Izabella, can you hear me? Yes. Oh, great. We are definitely out of time. We're a hungry bunch here. So if you are willing to send the paper, we can circulate it to the group and people can directly communicate with you if that's okay.
Yeah, for sure. I'll be happy to do that. I'll do that right away.
Thanks
Okay.
so much. It's good to see you again.